Good morning, I'm Remo, and this is the Daily Signal for December 1st, 2025. We're starting with breaking news. Hong Kong is reeling from one of its deadliest fires in history as the death toll climbs to 146 people trapped in a burning apartment building. This is a developing crisis, with families still searching for missing loved ones. Stay tuned for the rest of today's critical headlines.
Unfiltered. Now.
Here are 9 more breaking stories unfolding right now. Breaking: hundreds remain missing as catastrophic floods devastate Indonesia, entire communities swept away overnight. Urgent: terrifying accounts emerge from Sudan's war zone as civilians make desperate escapes from El Fasher under bombardment. Developing: 2 Palestinian children killed by Israeli forces amid escalating Gaza violence. International calls for restraint grow. Crisis: Israeli defense minister promotes officer whose soldiers shot surrendered Palestinians. Accountability scandal deepens. Massive: thousands flood Philippine streets, demanding government return stolen funds in corruption uprising. Explosive: new investigation probes how Trump presidency generated millions in personal wealth, financial records under scrutiny. Unprecedented: Netanyahu's legal team fights presidential pardon rules as corruption trial intensifies. Alarming: global arms dealers post record 5.9% revenue surge as world tensions escalate military spending. Shocking: UK government faces market manipulation probe over budget briefings, financial misconduct allegations surface. These stories are developing fast. Let's get the critical details you need to know right now. This is far worse than initially reported. The Hong Kong apartment fire that erupted late Friday night has now claimed 146 lives, making it one of the deadliest residential fires in the city's modern history. What authorities aren't telling you is the shocking reality. Most victims were trapped on upper floors when the building's single stairwell became a death trap filled with toxic smoke. Emergency responders faced a nightmare scenario as the building's outdated design created a chimney effect, turning the structure into a furnace. Survivors describe pure terror as families banged on windows, some jumping from dangerous heights in desperation. The implications are staggering. This exposes decades of ignored fire safety warnings in Hong Kong's aging housing stock. This could mean mandatory evacuations of similar buildings across the city, affecting hundreds of thousands of residents. Fire officials are scrambling to inspect other high-risk structures as families demand answers about how this preventable tragedy claimed so many lives. Meanwhile, another humanitarian disaster is spiraling out of control in Indonesia. Unprecedented flooding has left hundreds of people missing, with entire villages completely submerged. The situation is deteriorating by the hour. Rescue teams report finding empty homes with no trace of residents. Families simply vanished when walls of water struck in the middle of the night. What makes this worse is that many remote communities had no warning systems. Sources confirm our worst fears. The missing include dozens of children from a school that was conducting night programs when the floods hit. National emergency resources are overwhelmed as the disaster zone spans multiple provinces. This is happening right now. Satellite images show apocalyptic scenes of complete communities underwater, with rescue helicopters unable to land due to continued storms. The Indonesian military has been mobilized, but weather conditions are preventing access to the worst-hit areas where time is running out for survivors. Adding to today's crisis coverage, harrowing new accounts are emerging from Sudan's civil war as civilians make terrifying escapes from El Fasher in Darfur. Witnesses describe a city under siege, families fleeing with only the clothes on their backs as militias advance and aerial bombardments shake the ground. What's most disturbing is that many escapees report seeing bodies in the streets, with no time for burial as people run for their lives. The human cost is staggering. Refugees arriving at displacement camps tell of walking for days without food or water, carrying injured children and elderly relatives who couldn't keep up. Aid workers report that many don't survive the journey. This represents a complete breakdown of humanitarian protection in the Darfur region. International observers warn this could be the beginning of mass ethnic cleansing, similar to the genocidal campaigns of the early 2000s. In related breaking news, the crisis in Gaza deepens as Palestinian families report that Israeli forces killed 2 children amid persistent violence in the territory. The incident occurred during what residents describe as an intense military operation in a residential area. Local sources say the children were in their family home when the strike occurred, adding to the mounting civilian casualties in the ongoing conflict. International pressure is building for immediate de-escalation as human rights groups document what they call disproportionate use of force against civilian populations. The Biden administration faces growing calls to intervene as the situation threatens to spiral into wider regional conflict. What's particularly concerning is that this comes as ceasefire negotiations had shown signs of progress just days ago. The crisis deepens as we turn to another explosive development from Israel. Defense Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has promoted a military officer whose soldiers were involved in shooting deaths of 2 Palestinians who had reportedly surrendered. This promotion has triggered outrage from human rights organizations who call it a complete abandonment of military accountability. The officer in question was commanding troops when surveillance footage reportedly showed Palestinian civilians with their hands up being shot at close range. This is a breaking point for military ethics. Former Israeli military officials are speaking out publicly against what they call rewarding war crimes. International legal experts warn this could trigger formal war crimes investigations at the International Criminal Court. The timing couldn't be worse, as Israel faces mounting international isolation over its military conduct. But that's not the only political crisis today. In the Philippines, massive protests have erupted with thousands flooding the streets, demanding the government return stolen public funds in what's being called the largest anti-corruption uprising in years. Demonstrators are specifically targeting President Marcos Jr.'s administration over allegations that billions in development funds have been diverted to offshore accounts. What started as peaceful rallies in Manila has now spread to major cities across the archipelago. The situation is escalating. Police report that some protests have turned confrontational as activists attempt to march on government buildings. Opposition leaders are calling this a people power moment, similar to the movements that toppled previous corrupt administrations. Economic analysts warn that political instability could trigger capital flight and currency collapse in Southeast Asia's second-largest economy. Adding to today's political chaos, a major investigation is revealing how the Trump presidency may have generated millions in personal wealth through office abuse. Congressional investigators are examining complex financial records showing suspicious payments to Trump properties from foreign governments and domestic contractors seeking federal approvals. Sources describe a systematic pattern of mixing personal business with presidential duties. The implications are staggering. If proven, this could represent the largest presidential corruption scheme in modern American history. Trump's legal team denies all wrongdoing, but financial forensics experts say the paper trail is extensive and damning. This investigation comes as Trump prepares for another potential presidential campaign, raising questions about how criminal charges might affect his political future. Meanwhile, another major political figure faces legal jeopardy as Netanyahu's corruption trial takes a dramatic turn. His former lawyer made a stunning public statement that the Israeli president cannot grant a pardon without Netanyahu first admitting guilt. This legal interpretation destroys Netanyahu's strategy of seeking a preemptive presidential pardon while maintaining innocence. The case involves charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust that could result in prison time. This is a constitutional crisis in the making. Netanyahu's political survival depends on avoiding conviction, but his legal options are rapidly disappearing. Israeli legal experts predict this will force either a guilty plea or a risky trial that could end his decades-long political career. In alarming news for global security, the world's biggest arms producers just posted a record 5.9% revenue increase, signaling an unprecedented global military buildup. This surge reflects massive defense spending by nations preparing for potential conflicts. Major arms manufacturers in the U.S., Russia, and Europe report order backlogs extending years into the future as countries stockpile advanced weapons systems. The timing is ominous. This arms race acceleration comes as geopolitical tensions reach levels not seen since the Cold War. Defense analysts warn that such massive military investments often precede major conflicts, as nations calculate they must use their weapons before they become obsolete. This represents a fundamental shift toward global militarization that could destabilize international relations. And finally, a shocking financial scandal is erupting in the UK as regulators investigate possible market manipulation by the government itself during budget preparations. The Financial Conduct Authority is probing allegations that Chancellor Rachel Reeves deliberately released false information to manipulate market expectations before the official budget announcement. This could constitute serious financial crimes if proven. Opposition leaders are calling this the biggest government corruption scandal in decades, potentially involving deliberate lies to Parliament and markets that could have cost investors billions. If charges result, this could bring down the current government and trigger early elections in Britain. This is all part of a bigger picture that should terrify anyone paying attention. We're witnessing simultaneous crises in democratic accountability, military ethics, and government corruption across multiple continents. From Hong Kong's fire safety failures to Netanyahu's legal battles, from Philippine corruption protests to UK market manipulation, what we're seeing is a global breakdown of institutional trust and accountability. The pattern is clear. Leaders worldwide are facing unprecedented challenges to their authority as citizens demand transparency and justice. The arms spending surge suggests nations are preparing for conflicts while their own governments face internal legitimacy crises. The stakes couldn't be higher. These aren't isolated incidents. They represent fundamental challenges to democratic governance, rule of law, and international stability that will shape our world for years to come. We'll continue monitoring these developing situations throughout the day. The crisis coverage continues as these stories unfold in real time. This has been the Daily Signal. I'm Remo. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and we'll see you tomorrow with more breaking coverage of the stories that matter most.
Unfiltered.